demanding answers I didn't owe. I could feel the weight of their suspicion, the silent accusation that I didn't belong, even in my own home. They claimed to be HOA enforcers, but their real motive ran deeper than any neighborhood rule. Before I knew it, they were trying to force their way into my armory, unaware of who I really was or what I stood for. How far would they go to prove I didn't belong here? And what would happen when they learned the truth? Before we dive into the story, just a small request. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you never miss out on more stories like this. Most days, my life was quiet, structured even. I was the kind of neighbor who waved at passing cars, kept my lawn trimmed, and paid my dues on time. My home was my sanctuary, a place where I could unwind after long days spent training federal agents, teaching them how to handle high-pressure situations, how to stay calm when everything else was chaos. It was a job that demanded respect, but in my own neighborhood, I was just another face behind a front door. I took pride in my armory, not just as a collection, but as a symbol of my dedication and expertise. It was locked away, secure and legal, something I'd worked hard for. But even in this peaceful routine, there were moments when I felt eyes linger a little too long, or heard whispers that didn't quite fade when I walked by. I brushed it off, telling myself it was nothing. But that morning, as I sipped my coffee and looked out over the quiet street, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to change. I had no idea that my sense of safety was about to be shattered, not by strangers, but by people who claimed to be protecting the neighborhood. It started with a knock, sharp, insistent, echoing through the quiet of my morning. I opened the door to find two men in uniforms that didn't match any official badge I'd ever seen. Their shirts bore the HOA logo, but their demeanor was all wrong, too aggressive, too eager. They didn't introduce themselves, just flashed laminated cards and demanded to inspect my property. Their eyes swept over me, lingering a little too long, searching for something to justify their presence. I asked for clarification, but they brushed off my questions, insisting there had been complaints about my armory. My heart pounded. I knew my rights, knew the rules, but their tone made it clear. This wasn't about regulations. It was about control, about reminding me that, in their eyes, I was an outsider, no matter how many years I'd lived here or how much I'd contributed. They pushed past me, stepping onto my porch, voices rising. One of them glanced at my skin, then at the family photos in the hallway, and I saw it. The flicker of judgment, the unspoken accusation. I tried to stay calm to reason with them, but their questions grew sharper, more invasive. Why did I have so many firearms? Who was I training? Did I really belong here? Neighbors began to gather, drawn by the commotion. Some watched from behind curtains, others lingered on the sidewalk, whispering. I could feel their eyes on me, weighing every word, every movement. The men demanded access to my armory, threatening to call the police if I refused. My hands shook. Not from fear of what they might find, but from the knowledge that in this moment the truth didn't matter. Their minds were made up. I tried to explain my credentials, my work with federal agents, but they scoffed, dismissing my expertise as if it meant nothing. The more I spoke, the more they twisted my words, painting me as a threat instead of a neighbor. The tension thickened, every second stretching out, every breath harder to take. Then one of them reached for his radio, muttering about escalating the situation. My heart raced. I knew what that could mean, how quickly things could spiral out of control. I glanced at the crowd, searching for a friendly face, but found only uncertainty and fear. The men moved closer, blocking my doorway, their intentions clear. In that moment, I realized this wasn't just about me or my armory. It was about something deeper. About who gets to feel safe and who gets treated like a suspect in their own home. As the men prepared to force their way inside, I braced myself, knowing that what happened next would change everything. Would anyone step in, or would I be left to face this injustice alone? The air was thick with tension as the so-called enforcers stepped closer, their bodies blocking out the morning light. One of them shoved a clipboard in my face, demanding signatures, demanding compliance. The other's hand hovered near his belt as if daring me to resist. My heart hammered in my chest, every instinct screaming to stand my ground. but I could feel the weight of every eye in the neighborhood pressing down on me, waiting to see if I would break. They barked orders, voices sharp and echoing off the walls of my home. I tried to steady my breathing, tried to remember every lesson I'd ever taught about de-escalation, about staying calm under pressure. But it was different when you were the target, when you could see the suspicion in their eyes, the certainty that you were dangerous simply because of who you were. One of them reached for the lock on my armory, fingers fumbling with the code I'd set. I stepped forward, voice trembling but firm, reminding them that what they were doing was illegal. They laughed, a cold, dismissive sound, and for a moment I saw the truth. They didn't care about the law. They cared about power, about putting me in my place. The crowd outside grew, phones raised, faces tense. I could feel the fear and anger rising in my chest, the helplessness of knowing that, in this moment, my word meant nothing. But then, as they tried to force the door, I pulled out my credentials, proof of my work, my training, my authority. The room went silent. Their faces changed, confusion flickering into something like fear. For a split second, everything hung in the balance. Would they back down or would they push even further? The answer would define not just this moment, but how I and everyone watching would remember what happened next. In the end, the truth couldn't be ignored. My credentials, my years of service, my expertise forced the fake enforcers to hesitate. Their bravado faded, replaced by a nervous silence as the crowd outside pressed in, recording every second. They backed away, muttering about misunderstandings, but the damage was already done. The neighbors who had watched in silence now saw the reality, that even someone with my background, my training, could be targeted, doubted, and threatened in their own home, simply because of the color of their skin. The incident left a scar, not just on me, but on the entire community. For days, whispers filled the air, some people apologizing, others avoiding eye contact, everyone forced to confront an uncomfortable truth. I had always believed that my achievements would protect me, that respect was earned. But that morning proved otherwise. It didn't matter how many agents I'd trained or how many laws I'd followed. To some, I would always be an outsider, but I refused to let fear define me. I spoke out, sharing my story with neighbors, with colleagues, with anyone willing to listen. I wanted them to understand that racism isn't always loud or obvious. Sometimes it wears a uniform. Sometimes it hides behind rules and regulations. And sometimes it shows up at your door, demanding to be let in. This wasn't just my story. It's the story of so many who are judged before they're known, who are forced to prove their worth again and again. So I ask you, how many more times will we let this happen before we demand real change? How many more doors must be knocked on before we finally open our eyes?